The war had ended years ago. Robert Baratheon sat on the Iron Throne, fat, drunk, and growing more careless each day. But in the north, things were changing, and fast. Instead of staying in Winterfell like in the original timeline, Robb Stark, now a young man of 20, had ridden south at his father's command. Not for friendship, not for politics, but for power. When Robert called upon Ned Stark to be his Warden of the North, Ned had accepted, but he had sent his son Robb to King's Landing as a symbol of loyalty and northern strength. Robert had laughed when he saw Robb's serious face and wolfish eyes. "The boy looks like a Stark, no doubt," he said, slapping the young man's back. "But can he fight like one?" Robb had proved himself in the Greywater campaign, when rebels from the Riverlands rose against Robert's harsh taxes. At just 19, Robb led a northern force of 3,000 men and crushed the rebels, outsmarting older lords and earning the name the Young Wolf much earlier in life. By 21, he was no longer a boy. He wore black and silver armor with the direwolf of House Stark across his chest. His voice was deep and calm. His eyes missed nothing. Even the Lannisters, proud and cruel, began to whisper about the northern commander who had never lost a battle. But this Robb wasn't the same boy who once smiled in Winterfell. This Robb had tasted power, and he liked it. One day, as they sat in the War Council chamber, King Robert, now more drunk than usual, pointed a greasy finger at Robb. "You, Stark pup, you should be my hand, not your father. He always talks of honor. But you win battles." The room had gone silent. Even Jaime Lannister raised an eyebrow. "I serve where my father tells me," Robb said, calm as ever. Robert grunted. "Your father's wasting you in the north. Stay here, fight for me, be my sword." So Robb stayed, but not all were pleased. Cersei Lannister, the queen, hated the Stark boy. She saw how her husband looked at Robb like a proud father. She saw how the soldiers respected him, more than they respected Robert, and worse, she saw how Joffrey looked at Robb with fear. "You'll never be king if he stays," she told her son one night. "Mark my words." But Joffrey just sneered. "He's just a northerner." Still, Cersei sent spies. She whispered lies. She tried to turn the court against Robb, but the northern commander had his own circle, men like Ser Rodrik, Greatjon Umber, and even Renly Baratheon, who had grown fond of Robb's direct way of speaking. It was in the Great Hall of the Red Keep when Robb first saw the trap being set. A letter arrived, sealed in gold, the Lannister Lion. It was from Tywin Lannister, offering Robb lands, gold, and even marriage to one of his granddaughters. Robb read the letter once, then burned it. "I serve the king," he told the messenger, "not his enemies." But the game had already begun. Behind closed doors, whispers filled the halls of King's Landing. "Robb Stark wants to be king. He's building an army. He's too powerful, too young, too dangerous." And so the Lannisters began to plan his downfall. But what they didn't know was that Robb had his own plans. Quiet ones, dangerous ones, ones that involved secrets whispered in the dark, and ravens flying to Winterfell with messages only Ned Stark could understand, because Robb wasn't just a soldier anymore. He was becoming something else, something even Robert Baratheon couldn't. Control the halls of King's Landing. Had never felt more dangerous. Robb Stark walked with quiet steps, but his presence shook the capital. The gold cloaks saluted him with more respect than they showed most lords. The small folk whispered his name when he passed. "The Young Wolf," they said, with something between fear and hope in their voices. He had become more than just a northern commander. He was becoming a legend, and legends made powerful enemies. In the shadows of the Red Keep, Varys the Spider watched carefully. He didn't trust Robb Stark, not because of what the boy had done, but because of what he might do. "Too honorable," Varys whispered once to Littlefinger. "Like his father. And that is always dangerous in a nest of snakes." Littlefinger had only smiled. "Oh, I quite like Robb. He plays the game. But I wonder if he knows the rules." The trouble started not with war, but with a woman. Her name was Serena Waters, a bastard of noble blood, raised in the court as a handmaid of Queen Cersei. She was clever, sharp-tongued, and unafraid of men. She caught Robb's eye one evening after a dull feast when Robert had passed out in his chair, snoring like a dying bear. Serena had poured Robb wine without being asked. "You don't look like a man who drinks much," she said with a sly smile. Robb raised an eyebrow. "And you don't look like a girl who serves quietly." She leaned closer. "That's because I'm not." That night they really talked, about the court, the king, the war. She told Robb what the nobles truly said behind his back. How the High Septon had been bribed to speak against northern savagery. How Grand Maester Pycelle was warning the king that Robb's men were planning a coup. "Lies," Robb said. "Of course," Serena whispered. "But in King's Landing, lies can become truth if enough mouths repeat them." That's when Robb realized something. He was winning battles with swords, but losing the war of whispers. And in this city, whispers were sharper than blades. He began moving differently after that night. Less honor, more caution. He stopped attending every council meeting. He spoke less and watched more. He met secretly with Renly, offering him something that changed everything. "A place in the north," Robb said. "If Robert dies, the realm will burn between Stannis and the lions. But you have charm, and the people love you. And you?" Renly asked, amused. "What do you want in return?" Robb didn't smile. "When the storm comes, I want you on my side." But even as Robb built alliances, his enemies worked faster. Cersei sent a raven to Tywin in the west. The letter had only 5 words. "The wolf is rising. Strike now." 2 weeks later, news came that Jaime Lannister was marching north with 10,000 men, not to fight rebels, but to secure the Riverlands. It was a lie. Robb knew it. Catelyn Stark, who had come to King's Landing on a rare visit, knew it too. "They're baiting you," she said in a quiet voice in Robb's chambers. "They want you to call your banners and look like a traitor." "I won't call them," Robb replied. "Not yet. Then you'll die here," Catelyn warned, tears in her eyes. "Like your father almost did. Or worse, you'll die and the north will burn." Robb didn't answer right away. He stared at the window, looking toward the faraway north. "No," he said finally. "I'll not die here. If the lion strikes first, I'll bite back harder." And so he did. Robb began moving his pieces, quietly, raven by raven, whisper by whisper. He ordered trusted men like Greatjon Umber and Mage Mormont to prepare, but not march. He told Theon Greyjoy, still loyal at this point, to sail for Pike with a message. "Tell your father there's a war coming. Choose wisely." Then, one night, a scream rang through the Red Keep. Joffrey Baratheon had been poisoned. The boy prince was found foaming at the mouth, his face twisted in agony. Panic swept the court. Robert, half mad with grief and rage, accused everyone, even Cersei, even Renly, even Robb. And that's when everything exploded. Cersei blamed the Starks. She screamed that Robb had murdered her son to clear his path to power. Tywin declared war. The Lannisters marched on River Run, slaughtering all who stood in their way, but Robb didn't run. Instead, he walked into the throne room the next morning, cold, calm, armored, and knelt before Robert. "I swear on my father's name," he said, voice hard as ice, "I did not kill your son, but if you make me your enemy, I will not be the one who dies screaming." Robert looked into Robb's eyes, and for the first time in years, the king felt fear. The silence in the throne room was thick enough to choke on. King Robert stared down at Robb Stark, still on one knee, but his voice had cut through the hall like steel. The lords lining the chamber held their breath, watching, waiting. If Robert gave the word, the King's Guard would cut Robb down where he knelt. But if he didn't, he'd look weak in front of everyone. The young wolf had gambled everything on that moment. Robert rose from the Iron Throne with a grunt. His eyes were bloodshot, his beard stained with wine, his hands shaking. From anger or age, no one could tell. He slowly stepped down toward Robb, the sound of his boots echoing with each heavy step. "Do you think you frighten me, boy?" Robert asked, low and growling. "No," Robb said, meeting his eyes. "But I think I remind you of the man you used to be." That struck a nerve. Robert's lip curled, but he didn't strike him. Instead, he barked a laugh, loud, sharp, and bitter. "You got some bite, Wolf," Robert said. "That's good. Gods know this kingdom is full of worms and liars. Get up! Robb rose to his feet. You're not my enemy, Robert said finally, loud enough for all to hear. You're the only damn man in this court who speaks truth. And if Cersei or Tywin think they can scare me into killing you, and they've forgotten who the fuck I am. That decision echoed like thunder through the realm. Robb was not only spared, he was made Hand of the King. It was madness to some. A Stark boy, not even 25, commanding the crown's authority. But Robert didn't care. If I can't trust the Lannisters, I'll trust a Stark, he said. At least I know where he stands. Cersei was furious. She locked herself in her chambers for days. Pycelle warned that the North should never rule the South. The court buzzed with fear and suspicion. Even the small council had cracks in it now. Renly supported Robb. Varys said nothing but watched everything. Littlefinger smiled too much and spoke too softly, but Robb didn't waste time. He got to work, fast. He ordered the grain stores checked. Gold cloaks inspected. Ravens sent. He cleared out corrupt officers, punished thieves, and tightened security around the Red Keep. The people began to notice. The young hand, they called him. The wolf in armor. But all the while, Robb knew it wouldn't last. Tywin Lannister was marching, not toward war yet, but toward pressure. His bannermen moved through the Riverlands under the excuse of keeping peace. Lord Frey was being bought. House Piper was being threatened. The old lion was playing a slower game, so Robb changed the rules. He rode out of the capital secretly, leaving a trusted man to act in his name. Only Catelyn and Renly knew where he was going. With a small guard and Serena Waters riding beside him, Robb went west to meet the enemy before they attacked. He sent word ahead to Edmure Tully in Riverrun. Hold fast! Don't bend to the Lannisters. I'm coming! It was a dangerous move. Abandoning the capital without warning, riding through enemy lands, trusting only a few. But Robb wasn't playing politics anymore. He was preparing for war. And then came the news that changed everything. A raven from Winterfell, Eddard Stark, was dead, not murdered. Not executed, but found slumped over in his study, a blade still in his hand, blood on the floor. His heart stopped cold. Poison, Maester Luwin wrote. Fast, clean, northern herbs, used by healers or assassins. Robb didn't speak for a full hour after reading the letter. Then he mounted his horse and gave the order. We ride to Riverrun. Today, no more waiting. Serena tried to stop him. Robb, no more mercy, he said coldly. They took my father. They killed Joffrey and blame me. Now they want the North under their thumb. I won't let it happen. And somewhere far away, in the golden halls of Casterly Rock, Tywin Lannister received a raven of his own. 3 words. The wolf rises, he smiled, not out of joy, but in grim preparation. Let him come, Tywin said, setting down his goblet. Let the boy taste real war. I'll break him like I broke the rebels before, but this wasn't. The same Robb Stark they had watched grow in court. This was a different wolf now, and wolves don't come south unless they smell blood. The wind over the Riverlands was sharp and bitter, like it carried the voices of ghosts. Robb Stark stood at the edge of the Red Fork, staring at the high towers of Riverrun, banners flapping in the cold air. The direwolf of Stark flew beside the silver trout of House Tully, but things had changed since the last time he visited this place as a boy. Now he wasn't a guest. He was a commander, a war leader, a Stark in grief and fury. Inside the great hall, Edmure Tully rose from his seat when Robb entered. His beard had grown rough, his eyes red. I'm sorry for your father, he said. He was the best man I knew. Robb gave a tight nod. He was. But now he's gone, and the lions think we'll bow. House Frey has already bent the knee to Tywin, Edmure said, pacing. They let Lannister soldiers cross their bridges. Our rivers are red with blood, Robb. Good, Robb said flatly. Edmure blinked. Good? I want the Lannisters to think they've won, Robb replied. Let them spread their claws. It'll make cutting them off easier. Behind him, Serena Waters stepped forward, her cloak damp with rain. There are Lannister scouts 2 leagues west. Their numbers are growing, Robb turned to Edmure. Gather every man. Tully, Blackwood, Bracken, Mallister, every banner. I want 10,000 spears ready to march in 3 days. Edmure hesitated.
And then?
Robb's jaw tightened. Then we strike before they do. He wasn't waiting for Tywin to bring war to him. He was going to take it to Lannister lands, fast and brutal. The message would be clear. Ned Stark is dead, and the North will not kneel. But even as Robb planned war, his mind turned inward to something darker. He didn't believe for a second that his father had simply died by chance. Maester Luwin was careful with his herbs. Ned was too steady a man to fumble a blade into his own side. No. Someone wanted him gone, someone who knew Ned wouldn't bend, even from the north, and Robb had a list of suspects. At the top of it, Cersei Lannister. She had motive, access, and hatred. She'd lost her son, blamed Robb, and probably saw Ned as a threat to her power. But poison wasn't her style. Then there was Littlefinger, always smiling, always listening, a man who saw chaos as a ladder. Could he have killed Ned just to light a fire under the realm? Robb would find out after the war. After the lion bled, the next few days were a storm of movement. Squires ran through mud, sharpening blades. Blacksmiths hammered day and night. Ravens flew like ash from a burning forest. The river lords were rallying, faster than anyone expected. The realm thought Robb was hiding in King's Landing. Instead, he now commanded one of the largest forces outside the royal army, and none of it had been seen marching. By the end of the week, Robb had 12,000 men ready, angry, loyal, and then word came. Tywin Lannister had crossed the Golden Tooth. He's coming with 20,000 men, Edmure said. And Jaime's taken the eastern fords. They mean to trap us. They think I'll defend Riverrun, Robb said. They think I'll make the same mistake other green commanders make. He walked to the war table, dragging his hand across the carved river paths. His voice was low but clear. They think wrong. That night Robb sent 2 ravens. One flew north, carrying a message to Winterfell, not just for his bannermen, but for Jon Snow at the Wall. The other flew west, to Renly Baratheon. Right now, while the lion sleeps, we tear his throat out together. But Robb wasn't just depending on allies. He had another weapon, fear. He marched his army not to defend, but to ambush, drawing Tywin's forces into a narrow valley near Stonehenge, where the Lannister knights couldn't spread their full strength, and as the armies moved like pieces on a bloody chessboard, the small folk whispered louder. The wolf commands. He's not like the others. He fights to kill, not to conquer. In King's Landing, Queen Cersei received news of Robb's advance with cold fury. Let the North come, she told her uncle Kevin. We will bury them beneath their own snow. But even she began to feel unease, because Robb Stark was not just marching, he was hunting, and lions, when hunted, don't roar, they run. The rains came hard over the riverlands, thick, cold, and endless. They soaked the ground until it turned to black mud, swallowing horses to the knees. Men cursed as their boots sank, armor rusted, and campfires sputtered in the wet. But Robb Stark didn't complain. He rode through the storm like it wasn't even there, soaked to the bone, eyes locked on the hills ahead. He was waiting, just west of Stonehenge, on the edge of a narrow gorge. 12,000 Northerners and Riverlanders crouched beneath trees and behind rock, waiting in silence for the lions to walk into the jaws, and now they were close. A scout came riding fast through the mud, breath ragged. "They're here, my lord," he said. "Tywin's vanguard, 4,000 strong, just entered the gorge." Robb gave one nod. Nothing more. He turned to his commanders, Great John Umber, Edmure Tully, Mage Mormont, and Serenia Waters, who now wore armor of black leather and silver thread. "They think we're hiding in Riverrun. They think we're afraid. The wind blew through the trees like a whisper. We show them how wrong they are." Then came the howl. Grey winds called from the ridge above, and Robb gave the signal. It started with fire. Barrels of burning pitch were rolled down the slopes, bursting open among the Lannister soldiers like exploding suns. Screams echoed through the gorge as men burned, horses reared, and the golden lions turned to chaos. Then the Northerners charged. Robb led the front line himself, sword drawn, grey wind leaping beside him like a shadow of death. Arrows rained from the trees. Axes swung in the mud. The Lannisters, caught in a narrow path, couldn't spread their formation. They fought like trapped rats, proud knights choking in smoke and blood. In less than an hour, the vanguard was broken. But Robb didn't stop there. He knew Tywin Lannister wouldn't sit back after that. He'd rally. He'd come in force. So Robb did something no one expected. He vanished, leaving only a token force to slow Tywin's approach. Robb led the bulk of his army north, vanishing into the woods with lightning speed. He struck smaller Lannister camps in the dead of night, burned their supply lines, crushed outriders in the rain. By the time Tywin reached Stonehenge with the rest of his force, he found no enemy to face and no food to eat. "Where is he?"
Tywin barked.
"Where is the wolf?" But Robb was already gone. He had turned the war into a game of ghosts, always striking, never staying. Back in King's Landing, Cersei Lannister tore through her chambers in fury. "That Stark boy is destroying our forces like a bloody wildfire." She screamed at Grand Maester Pycelle. Pycelle wheezed, old and trembling. "Perhaps a truce?" "Truce," she snapped. "I want his head." But she wasn't the only one growing desperate. Renly Baratheon had begun marching too, raising his own banners. Robb's letter had planted something in him. The idea that the realm didn't need dragons or lions. It needed someone people could follow. Someone charming, someone alive. And now the Lannisters faced war on two fronts, even worse. Word spread that Stannis Baratheon had begun gathering ships. The kingdom was fracturing, and all while Robb was gaining ground. At River Run, Robb returned to thunderous cheers. His soldiers saw him not just as a commander now, but as a symbol. The North's vengeance, the wolf that would not die. In the hall, Edmure poured him wine. "You've done more in 3 weeks than most lords do in a lifetime." Robb took the cup, but his voice was quiet. "It's not enough. What more could you want?" Robb looked toward the west, toward Casterly Rock, beyond the mists and mountains. "I want the lion's den," he said, "and I want it to burn." That night, Serenia joined him by the fire. Her armor was off, her hair still damp from the rain. She studied his face, so still, so cold. "You can't keep fighting like this forever," she said. "You'll burn out." "Then I'll burn," Robb said softly, "but I'll take them with me." She didn't argue, because she saw it now. In his eyes, Robb Stark had changed. He had started this war for loyalty, for justice, for family. But now it was personal. The lion had taken his father. Now the wolf would take everything. The sky over the Westerlands was dark. But not from clouds. It was smoke. Thick plumes rose from the hills, blackening the air as fire danced across fields once golden with wheat. Villages were nothing but ash piles. Roads that once bustled with traders now echoed with the sound of steel and screams. The wolf had come west, and he brought ruin with him. Robb Stark's army had crossed the Red Fork under nightfall, moved through Fair Isles, and was now cutting a blood path straight toward Casterly Rock. No one had expected it. Not Tywin, not Cersei, not the realm, because no army in history had ever dared strike. At the Lion's Den, but Robb wasn't just striking, he was humiliating. Tywin Lannister's soldiers were being picked apart by a force that never stopped moving. One day they hit a caravan, the next a garrison. They never camped long, never fought fair. Robb had turned his army into ghosts, and behind him he left a trail of fear. Small folk whispered in dread and awe, "The young wolf rides with death." Lannister banners were torn down, burned, spat on. Gold cloaks who once sneered at the north now prayed not to see the dire wolf crest, but Robb didn't revel in it. He just got colder. He didn't celebrate victories anymore. He didn't feast or joke like he once did in Winterfell. Each win was just a step closer to his goal. Casterly Rock, the place where Tywin's pride lived. The place where everything began. Serenia Waters, riding beside him on most days, had begun to worry. Not for the war. They were winning. But for Robb himself. "You haven't smiled in weeks," she said one evening. Their camp settled near the burning ruins of Golden Tooth. "I haven't had reason," Robb answered. "You're winning," she said. "That's reason enough." "No," he said quietly. "Winning would be Tywin kneeling. or Cersei swinging from a rope. That would be enough. Serenia didn't press him, because part of her agreed. 2 days later, a raven came from the east, sealed in Renly Baratheon's colors. Robb opened it. Read the contents once, then again. Renly was offering him an alliance. Together, we strike from both sides. I take King's Landing. You take the Rock. When the lions fall, we divide the realm. It was bold, dangerous, tempting, and exactly what Robb needed. He sent back a short reply. March, I'll hold Tywin in the west. And just like that, the realm began to collapse. With Robb in the west and Renly in the east, the Lannisters were choking. Their supply lines gone, their allies fading. Even dawn had begun stirring, quiet but watchful. Tywin had sent ravens to every corner of the kingdom. Begging for support, few answered. Most had learned something important over the last month. The lion still roars, but the wolf kills. At Harrenhal, Tywin sat in a war room filled with torn maps and broken pride. His armor sat beside him, scratched and dirtied. His eyes burned from sleepless nights. He had underestimated the boy, not in skill, but in ruthlessness. Robb fought like a Stark. Yes, but also like a Bolton, a Targaryen, even a wildling. He fought with fire, with mind, with vengeance. Tywin had taught his children to never play fair, and now that lesson had come home. Kevin entered the tent. Robb's forces just sacked Silverhill. Lord Brax is dead. Tywin closed his eyes. And Renly? He asked. Past Storm's End. Heading for King's Landing. Tywin leaned back in his chair. They mean to break us, he whispered. They already are, Kevin said. But Robb wasn't finished. That same night, his scouts returned from the west. The gates of Casterly Rock, they reported, are open. Robb didn't believe it at first. A trap, surely. Tywin would never leave the rock undefended. But when he arrived, riding at the head of 3,000 men through the outer hills, he saw it with his own eyes. No banners flew from the towers. No soldiers stood on the ramparts, only silence and ash. The people inside had fled. The noble Lannister household had vanished. Tywin had abandoned the rock, not out of cowardice, but to save what he still had left. The capital, the legacy. Robb stood at the gates, wind whipping his cloak, and stared at the hollow symbol of a family that once ruled the realm. This isn't the end, Edmure said beside him. Robb nodded. No, it's just the beginning. They rode in. Casterly Rock had fallen, and in King's Landing Queen Cersei received the news in a single line from a raven. The wolf is in the den. She crushed the parchment in her fist, eyes blazing. Then burn the whole damn forest, she said, because the game wasn't over. It was about to get uglier than ever. King's Landing was drowning. Not in blood, not yet, but in paranoia. The bells rang day and night, not for weddings or funerals, but for alarms. The streets boiled with rumors. Renly's army is at the gates. Robb Stark has taken the rock. The Queen has gone mad. Each tale wilder than the last, each truth darker than the rumors. In the Red Keep, Queen Cersei stood at her balcony, staring at the Blackwater Bay. Her wine cup trembled slightly in her hand, though her face remained as hard as stone. The wolves and stags are closing in, said Grandmaster Pycelle, voice wheezy as ever. We must consider surrender. Cersei turned slowly. Say that word again, she hissed. And I'll have your tongue nailed to the wall. Pycelle fell silent. Behind her, Tommen, barely 10 years old, played with wooden soldiers. He didn't understand. Not yet. Cersei looked at him with cold affection. Her last son, her last claim to power. She would not lose him. She would not lose anything. So she called for Qyburn. He came like a shadow, draped in black robes, his eyes hungry and cold. I need a message sent to Harrenhal, she whispered to him. To your friend in the dungeons? Qyburn gave a slight bow. I assume you want something done quietly. No, Cersei said. I want it done loud. I want the North to remember what happens when they defy a lion. Far away, at Casterly Rock, Robb Stark stood in the great hall where Tywin once sat. The air still smelled of cold stone and fear. Robb didn't smile. He hadn't for days. The rock had fallen, and it meant nothing. He had expected resistance, defiance, a fight worthy of his father's memory. But there was no glory in walking through empty halls, no vengeance in toppling a kingdom already abandoned. Still, the message was clear. The lion's lair was his now, and the realm had taken notice. Ravens flew from Old Town to the Twins. Lords who once swore fealty to the crown began rethinking their oaths. The North and Riverlands already called him King Robb, though he had never asked for the title. But the war wasn't won yet, because while the lion's body was bleeding, the head still roared from the Red Keep, and Robb knew what that meant. "She's going to do something stupid," he said one night to Serena Waters, who now wore her sword like a second skin. Serena looked at him across the fire. "She's Cersei Lannister. She doesn't do something stupid. She does something cruel." The next morning they got the raven. Its seal was black wax. No sigil, no name. Robb read the scroll once. Then again. Then he crushed it in his hand and stared at the flames. "What is it?" Edmure asked. "They found her," Robb said, his voice low. "They found my mother, Catelyn Stark." She had stayed in Riverrun after Robb marched west, helping coordinate supplies, keeping the River Lords together. But Cersei had sent Sir Meryn Trant, a dozen silent sisters, and one of Qyburn's pets. They had taken her in the night. Now she was in King's Landing, in a cell beneath the Red Keep, a hostage, a message, a threat. "She's baiting you," Edmure said. "She wants you to come." Robb's face was stone. "I was already going." Meanwhile, in the east, Renly Baratheon was camped outside Storm's End, regrouping with new banners from the Reach. Sir Loras Tyrell, his lover and general, urged him forward. "If we strike now, we take the capital while Robb draws their eye," Loras said. But Renly hesitated. He liked to play the king, wear fine cloaks, smile at the crowd. But this, real war, he wasn't ready. So Robb sent him a raven of his own. "If you delay, I strike alone. And when I win, I'll remember you didn't ride beside me." That was all it took. Within days, Renly's banners flew east. Over 30,000 strong, the storm was finally rolling toward King's Landing from one side, and from the other, Robb Stark marched, hardened by victories, dragging Casterly Rock's wealth and steel behind him. In King's Landing, Cersei watched from her tower as the skies darkened and ravens flew like warnings. "They think they'll take my city," she whispered to Tommen, brushing his hair with trembling fingers. "They think they'll break me." Tommen didn't answer. He just looked up with innocent eyes. She kissed his forehead. "I'll burn this whole world before I lose you," she whispered, and beneath the castle, Qyburn's machines whirred and hissed. Casks of wildfire were being moved, secrets being prepared. If the wolf and stag came to take her throne, they would do so through fire. The fields outside King's Landing were thick with tension, like the air before a storm that never ends. On the eastern hills, Renly Baratheon's army stood in tight formation, 30,000 strong, banners of the stag and rose fluttering above golden tents. The Tyrells had arrived in full force, shining like polished gods in gold and green. On the western ridge, across the Blackwater, came the thunder of hooves and steel. Robb Stark, cloaked in grey and silver, leading 12,000 Northerners, Riverlanders, and burned-out soldiers from Casterly Rock. His direwolf, Grey Wind, prowled at his side, silent as ever, fangs bared. His face was pale, eyes sharp. He didn't look like a boy anymore. He looked like vengeance in armor. Between the two armies lay King's Landing, no longer a city of glory, but a trap of wildfire and secrets. Inside the Red Keep, Queen Cersei stood before the Iron Throne in her blackest gown, her golden goblet in one hand, her other resting lightly on Tommen's shoulder. He didn't understand. He smiled nervously as the city shook from marching feet. "Mother," he said, "they're coming." She smiled and kissed his cheek. "Let them." Deep in the cellars, Qyburn's machines hummed, wheels grinding, barrels of wildfire lined in rows, like soldiers ready to explode. Cersei had ordered it all prepared. If she couldn't have the realm, No one would. Robb met Renly in a broken watchtower just before dawn. No banners, no guards. Just the two men facing each other across a cracked stone table. "You took your time," Robb said. Renly gave a small smile. "I wanted to see if you'd bleed the city first." Robb's eyes narrowed. "This isn't about glory. My mother's inside. I'm not burning the Red Keep to the ground just to wear a crown I never asked for." Renly leaned in. "You take the gates. I take the harbour. We kill the queen, rescue your mother, and split the kingdom." Robb nodded. "Fine, but one thing first." "What?" "If Tommen yields, he lives." "He's just a boy." Renly didn't answer right away. Then he said, "Deal." They clasped hands. For a brief second, the future of Westeros was decided in silence between a wolf and a stag. The Battle of King's Landing began at dawn. Renly's cavalry struck from the south, crushing the outer walls near the Dragon Gate. Tyrell archers rained fire upon the gold cloaks, who had already begun to turn against the queen. From the west, Robb Stark's men stormed the Lion Gate. Great Jon Umber smashed the portcullis with a siege ram, while Edmure Tully led the first wave through blood-soaked streets. But the closer they got to the Red Keep, the more they realized something was wrong. The city wasn't resisting, it was waiting. Suddenly the ground beneath the gate exploded. Wildfire, a green inferno, burst into the sky, devouring men and stone alike. Hundreds died in seconds, melted by the Mad King's forgotten death. Grey wind howled. Robb was thrown from his horse, armor searing hot. Smoke blinded him. The sky turned green. Renly's men on the other side watched in horror as flames climbed the city walls. Screams echoed like sirens through the smoke. Children, soldiers, horses, all burning, and on the balcony of the Red Keep, Cersei watched it all, her golden hair wild in the wind, goblet raised high. "This is mercy," she said. "They'll remember who burned them." Behind her, Qyburn nodded once, before disappearing down the steps. But Cersei had misjudged something. Robb survived, bloodied, burned but alive. He rose from the wreckage as grey wind circled protectively. His men rallied around him. They didn't retreat. They roared, "For the north!" They surged forward. No more strategy, no more patience, only vengeance. By midday the gates were torn open. The Red Keep was surrounded. Renly's soldiers breached the black cells, finding prisoners chained and mutilated. But among them, alive, was Catelyn Stark. She was weak, bruised but breathing. When she saw Robb, tears broke through her cracked lips. "My son." He knelt beside her. "You're safe now, Mother. I swear it." But higher up in the throne room, Cersei was already pouring her last cup of wine. Tommen, pale and afraid, clutched her hand. "They'll kill us," he whispered. "No," she said gently, pulling him close. "They'll never touch you." She reached for a vial of poison, but the doors burst open before she could raise it. Robb Stark entered first, helmet off, face scorched with smoke and ash. Behind him came Serenia Waters, sword drawn, and Renly Baratheon, flanked by Tyrell knights. Cersei didn't scream. She didn't beg. She just sat straight and sneered. "So this is what wins. A bastard, a wolf, and a fraud." Robb stepped forward. "You killed my father," she laughed, "and I'd do it again." Then Serenia moved, quick, silent, and plunged her blade through Cersei's chest. No ceremony, no mercy, just silence. Tommen cried as his mother fell. Robb took the boy gently by the arm. "You're going to be safe," he said, "but your house is done." Later that night, in the ashes of the throne room, Robb stood before the Iron Throne. He didn't sit. He turned and walked away. Let Renly have it, he thought. Let the game of kings keep playing. The wolf had come south not to rule, but to avenge. And now that it was done, the north would rise again on its own. Free, and never again would they kneel to lions.